Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing really well and welcome back to my podcast, Life of an Artrepreneur. So in today's episode, I'm going to answer all the questions that I didn't get around to answering in the previous episode. I feel like I've got some really good ones. I've left the best till last, and I feel like there's quite a nice range of questions as well. So I'm going to answer them at random again, and hopefully they help. So I'm going to start with a really good one. So do you think anyone can learn to draw realistically, or is there a talent component? I think that is such a good question. There's always that debate, isn't there, whether, being an artist or being creative is like a talent, like you're born with it and you can just do it, or whether it can be learnt, especially like later on in life. And I think it definitely can be learnt. I think people are naturally more creative than others, and they can learn it a lot quicker because they have that natural skill and sort of talent. But talent really isn't anything without a lot of hard work, a lot of patience, and a lot of practice. And to draw realistically, you need definitely all three of those. It's not easy at all. And I think you need to learn the fundamentals of whatever medium you're working in. So whether that's colour pencils like me, really get to know your pencils, get to know your paper, try different surfaces, try different pencils, see what feels natural and what works for you. And then start with those very first initial basic techniques. And I feel like the first sort of 20 drawings that you do will probably be not your best work. You'll look back and think like, oh, I don't like that at all. I've got loads of drawings in my drawer that are just unfinished, ones that I did years ago. And I think, you learn something different with every drawing that you do. You naturally get better. You can definitely see a progression the more that you practice. You do naturally get better the more time you spend doing something, because as you're drawing, you're learning how different pencils layer together, how the paper takes the layers, how to blend, what colours work well together. You just learn a lot as you're kind of doing it. So I'd say it's a bit of both, but more on the scale of it can definitely be learnt. You just need a lot of patience and be willing to learn and willing to improve with every drawing that you do. And I think as long as you strive for the next drawing that you create to be a lot better than the one that you've just finished, then you're always going to improve, because you've got that internal critique saying what needs tweaking. That inner voice or inner critique definitely develops over time. But yeah, like I said, talent is nothing without a lot of hard work, a lot of patience, and a lot of practice. The next one is, what's one species you haven't drawn yet but really want to? I think I've pretty much drawn every single animal on planet Earth, but I haven't. I'd love to draw more fish, like sea life. I feel like there's so many different textures and bright colours going on there. Birds, the same. I've drawn sort of your everyday British garden birds, but I feel like there's so many other birds that are full of textures, full of patterns, loads of different vibrant, rich colours. So yeah, definitely sea life creatures, birds, and I think reptiles, because I don't think I've drawn any reptiles. I've drawn like a bumblebee and a butterfly, but they're not like reptiles. I feel like a snake would be quite interesting to draw. Not my favourite subject matter to draw, but I feel like the textures again would be very interesting. But yeah, I'd say those three. There's not one particular animal that's really standing out. I feel like all the ones that I've really wanted to draw, I have drawn. But yeah, any suggestions to what I should draw next? Comment below, because it's always interesting to hear what other people want to see you draw. The next question leads on from that, and it's, which animal has been the most challenging to draw and why? I'm gonna have to think about that one. I've got two answers for this, so I'll either say the elephant or the rhino. Very similar in terms of skin texture, very different to fur. It's not a texture that I draw day in, day out. So it really took a lot of breaking it down and using colours that I'd not really used before, just exploring a whole new range of techniques, basically. I'd probably say the rhino more than the elephant. The elephant I did 2 years before I did the rhino. The rhino I've finished this year, and it was a lot more in depth. And I actually filmed that for a tutorial as well. So it was a 12-part tutorial. I was trying to teach my way through it whilst trying to figure it out myself. And it took me quite a few months to complete. And just to top it all off, we drew grass at the bottom, which again is another really difficult texture to draw. So yeah, I'd say the rhino was quite challenging, or my other answer would have been like a commission that has a really grainy old reference photo. I always get questions as to like how to approach that when the client gives you reference photos that aren't really good enough to draw from. Like, how on earth are you supposed to create something that looks super photorealistic when working from a really grainy, blurry old photo? And I'd say my main advice is just to approach it as you would do with any other drawing. You know, work from light to dark, build up your layers and your values gradually, and try and find the same breed on the internet in a similar position to the reference photo, and pull out the details from that and kind of incorporate them in your drawing, but also, you know, using a few different photos to try and get the outcome that you want. It is difficult though. I think the more demand that you have for commissions, the more selective you can be with which ones you actually take on, and maybe be honest with the client and say, it's not going to be my most super photorealistic drawing that I've ever done, but I'll do my best. It might just have like a softer outcome. So yeah, my most challenging drawing I've ever done is either the rhino or a commission where I'm working from a grainy photo. This is a really good one if you're a colour pencil artist. What's a common mistake beginner colour pencil artists make, and how can they fix it? So I think when you're, and I did this as well, when you get like your first set of colour pencils and you start drawing, you just want to draw realistically straight away. So you think, right, detail, 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 but you won't have built up your base layers or the layers underneath that are like the main bulk of the drawing. And your details you only really need to add towards the end. If you add your details too early on, it can end up making your drawing look quite flat. So it's important to build up all of the colour so the drawing looks really full, really blended, and then you can start incorporating that detail to bring it all together. I think that's probably a common mistake, adding details too early on. And then sort of linking to that, a lot of beginner artists think that you need a really sharp pencil all the way through, and you don't. You actually work with quite a lot of blunt pencils most of the time, especially when working on fur. I'll use like the side of the pencil quite a lot to get that flatter surface to shade with, which will give you a softer line, so you won't be able to see like individual pencil strokes. It'll just be a gradual build-up of colour. So blunt pencils are fine, sharp pencils for details, and don't add those details too early on. I'd say that's my main advice. And also, if you're finding that your drawings are looking too faint or they're not taking any more layers, one or the other, you're either too light pressured or too heavy-handed. And knowing how much pressure to add and like different pressure points all comes down to practice. And I think actually you need to really feel confident in drawing with graphite first before you go and draw with colour pencils, because colour pencils are a whole different thing. You need to think about colour and everything like that, layering, whereas graphite is solely focused on your pressure. So practice some graphite drawings first if you are struggling with that pressure aspect, and then move on to colour pencil drawings. My next question is, what's the biggest misconception people have about creating realistic animal art? I feel like that's quite a good one as well. I think there's always this big debate, isn't there, between conceptual art and realistic art, and usually the people who love conceptual abstract art hate realism, and people who love realism hate the abstract, and then there's kind of a few in between that like can appreciate both. I'd say the biggest misconception is that it's easy and it's just copying from a photo, and a lot of the time it isn't that, especially with commissions and original artwork. You're often combining multiple photos together, creating your own sort of composition. You're using colours from one photo and incorporating that into your drawing, but using like the lighting and positioning of another photo and incorporating that in your drawing and combining the two. So it's not just copying straight from a photo. You're using that photo for details, and you want to kind of represent the photo, not have like a exact photo replica. And I think it shows so much skill being able to create something that does look so realistic, and you know, you can see that you've practiced for years to get the right techniques or the right balance of something just to make it look just right, so you get that realistic illusion. I think a lot of people can appreciate that, and a lot of people invest in realistic art because they can see the skill behind it. And it's not for everyone, and that's fine. But I also think, you know, if people start saying why just copy from a photo, you could then argue why just splatter some paint on a canvas and then link it to how it means this and that. Like, it's kind of the same thing. Art is so subjective, and you'll like what you like and you'll not like what you don't like. and that's fine. I just think stick to what you're good at and what you enjoy, whether that is abstract, whether that is realistic, or somewhere in between. I know a lot of artists, like pet portrait artists, also do abstract paintings like that can hang up in people's homes, because there's such a big market for that as well. So it just depends. And realistic wildlife art is not easy. And I think, you know, if you're doing original artwork that's also contributing to conservation and actually helping wildlife, then there's the meaning. So whether it is realistic or abstract, it doesn't really matter, as long as you're being creative and it's for a good cause and you're enjoying it along the way. So the next question is, what was the turning point when your art went from hobby to a viable business? There's not really a particular moment that stands out in my head, but I just think having that time during the lockdown where I could literally invest all my time into building it into a business that was going to grow, I guess that was the turning point in a way, where it changed from just being a hobby that I did here and there to something that I did full time that had huge potential with all these other sort of income streams that I had no idea of at the time. I think as long as you're, you know, upping your prices and exploring other income streams and just doing everything that you can to help it to grow steadily, you're on that upwards trajectory then. So it's bound to succeed in one way or another. You just have to be like super consistent. And I think without that consistency over so many years, maybe there wouldn't have been a turning point in hobby to like full-time business. It just would have stayed as a hobby. I guess another turning point from when my art transitioned from a hobby into a business would be when I started growing a lot on social media. And again, that comes down to a lot of consistency and constantly documenting everything, making content, editing videos. Like that takes up so much time, and you have to be like super committed to doing that consistently for you to see any results. My Instagram in particular started getting a lot of engagement, and I really do think it is down to being consistent. And I always get questions like, how have you managed to get from this to this in such a short space of time? And my answer is always just be consistent and upload good quality, relatable content. So the last question that I'm going to finish off with is, what are some revenue streams you didn't expect to enjoy or rely on when you first started? The obvious one is probably Patreon. I started that just over 4 years ago, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing in terms of tutorials back then. Like, I didn't really know how to film a good quality professional tutorial, and I definitely didn't know how to edit it, or, you know, I learned a lot within those first few months just in terms of video editing and how to actually teach my way through something and demonstrate something that was easy for someone else to understand. It's quite difficult teaching initially, because you're almost teaching yourself, because before you've never really considered how you actually do something or really taken note of like your overall process. You just almost subconsciously do it. So those first few months I really struggled, and again I struggled being consistent when there wasn't really that much growth at first, and it was taking up so much time, and I'd given myself way too many tutorials to create initially. I should have just started down here instead of up here. So that was difficult. Maybe those first 6 months I thought, is this something that I'm going to continue with or not? And then gradually more and more people sort of joined my Patreon, and the positive feedback really is what has kind of spurred me to keep going. And now it's what takes up like 80% of my time. I absolutely love that platform and the community that I've built on there, and I feel like it's just a really nice place where everyone can share their own work, be supportive of each other, ask questions. You know, I'm constantly creating tutorials, thinking of new ideas for videos and content. So yeah, I'm glad that I've carried on with Patreon, considering that I didn't really enjoy it that much right at the start, because I probably didn't know what I was doing as much. But yeah, I'd say that's definitely the most rewarding part of my whole sort of job, and it's one of my main income streams of my whole job as well. So yeah, I hope that has answered some of your questions. There is sort of 5 or 6 left, I think, but I think I've been filming this for quite a while now, so maybe I'll answer those next questions in a future Q&A at some point. But yeah, thank you for watching this video. If you've been watching on YouTube, I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you did, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel to see future episodes. If you've been listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, then I'd love it if you could leave a review and let me know if you've got any requests for upcoming episodes as well. I've filmed this episode on a different camera. I don't know if you can tell the difference. I feel like the lighting looks a little bit darker, but the quality should be better. Whether that's a good thing or not, I'm not sure. Thanks for watching or listening, and I'll be back next week with a brand new episode.